Terrorist group Islamic State have threatened to launch an attack on the four stadiums hosting the first leg of the Champions League quarter-finals. Arsenal host Bayern Munich in North London, and Man City travel to take on Real Madrid in the Spanish capital this evening. Now, Spanish police have confirmed they have activated all systems in response to the threats. The Met Police say they will have a robust policing plan in place for tonight's Arsenal versus Bayern Munich match at the Emirates Stadium. In a statement, the force said the UK terrorism threat level remains at substantial, meaning an attack is likely, and we work closely with colleagues from across counter-terrorism policing in planning for events here in London to take into account any relevant information that could help us to keep those attending safe. I'm joined now by the former head of National County Terrorism Security Office, Chris Phillips. Chris, my first question, maybe this is an obvious answer, but why would ISIS warn us ahead of a terror attack?
Well, good point, JJ, and that's the key point here. They wouldn't, and what they want to do, of course, is remind people that they still exist, but also to put some fear into people. Listen, terrorism is all about creating fear, and of course that does this to some extent. And those people going to these matches will be a little bit doing in trepidation tonight, but they shouldn't do because, as you quite rightly say, the last thing a terrorist want to do is to tell that they're going to do it, because they're far more likely to get a negative result.
Yeah. So how will the stadiums react to this threat? Will they be stopping people from taking in bags and things to the matches tonight?
Well, to be quite honest, these stadiums are very, very well versed in counter-terrorism measures and security measures generally. There are rings of security, you don't always see them, where vehicles are kept away from key parts, where people are being scanned and searched, etc. This is normal security. I think what may be stepped up tonight and you know, maybe in the foreseeable future is much more security around the transport hubs that lead into these stadiums, because of course they're much easier to attack than the stadium itself.
Yeah, so I'm not a fan of Arsenal, I have to say. I am a Spurs man, but I've been to the Emirates. I know they've got lots of counter-terrorism in place, and it's disguised so that us fans don't realise. So you've got these huge cannons, obviously it's one of the big symbols for Arsenal, and they're in place to stop cars from being able to drive through. What else do the stadiums have in place like that?
Yeah, that's interesting. Those counter-terrorism hostile vehicle mitigation measures were actually put in when we looked at the stadium and saw the gaps. And there are a number of others that aren't quite so obvious as well that exist to protect. But of course, you've also got CCTV cameras. You've got security teams now that are much more well versed in searching and looking for suspicious behaviour. So there's many security measures in place right across Europe now. This threat of terrorism has not really changed over the last 10, 15 years. It's been there. Stadiums have always felt that they needed to protect themselves. And of course, what we've seen here is ISIS trying to remind you that they're there, particularly after the attack in Moscow, and to say, listen, we can attack at any time. I think the biggest concern for police and security services is someone under the radar that pops up that decides, because of this, to go and do something stupid. And of course, that's what the police will really be concerned about. But of course, the other thing is the intelligence that goes in the background, where police are monitoring those people that they consider a real threat. So there's lots of work going on in the background. People shouldn't be unduly concerned. The last thing you do if you're a terrorist is to tell people you're coming and really get on with business as usual.
So, yeah, you mentioned the ISIS attack in Moscow. That was at the Crocus City Hall. In that attack, there were 143 people killed, men dressed in camouflage stormed. But that was a music event. And maybe I'm naive in saying this, but I feel if an incident happened at a football game, especially with England football fans, I feel like English football fans are more likely to stand up and fight back.
Yeah, it's not just that, though, is it? If you look back to the attacks in Paris, you know, there were two bombers that tried to blow themselves up live on television at the Stade de Paris. So stadiums and sporting events have been targeted. They're more difficult to target than actual theatres and things like that, simply because they don't have games all the time. There's, you know, once or twice a week, whereas your shopping centre is open 7 days a week. So it's a much easier target for terrorists to attack. What I would say is, we can talk about this. We are talking about this. It's right that we do because the threat is still there. We mustn't get ourselves too concerned about it, because if we do, then the terrorists win, JJ, and we don't do anything. We don't go to football matches. We don't go to shopping centres. The key thing is that people are alert generally and report suspicions to the police.
Well, the Met Police said they're taking this threat seriously. Is there any risk that the game could be called off?
No, I don't think so. And the terrorism threat level hasn't gone up, which means the intelligence community, the threat level is actually dictated by JTAC, which is a unit within MI5, who are looking at all the intelligence they've got that's going on in Europe, across the world, and particularly in the UK. And they've not put the threat level up. So we shouldn't be too concerned about this. I think it is business as usual. And, there's enough threats that when you go to Arsenal football matches without worrying about terrorism too much.
Chris, you are extremely well experienced when it comes to terrorism and being in charge of big stadiums. What's been your experience of ruling over a stadium when we've been on high alert?
Well, it's really difficult. I can actually go back to Wimbledon. I was at Wimbledon when we actually had exactly the same thing, what we call 10p terrorism, where the IRA managed to phone up the newspapers and say there was a coded bomb threat at the stadium itself, within the tennis itself. And you have to really be considered about your judgment, because if you close these things down, if you empty the stadium, the match is over. It's not going to go on again. So you really do need to do your work beforehand, make sure the location is searched, make sure people coming in are searched. And then, you've got to take some risks as well, be willing to accept the risks that terrorists can't be allowed to close things down just by a phone call. And that's where we are with this particular scenario, I think.
So with the 4 countries involved, France, Spain, Germany, UK, will our governments have been colluding and sharing information?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we are better placed than the other countries, but they're trying to catch up. We've got the Five Eyes security apparatus, which really is second to none across the world. And we do pick up intelligence. Often we pick up intelligence that we then have to share. We do share across Europe because their intelligence is generally very good. But yes, the agencies work much closer together now than ever before. Stadiums even work closer together. I looked after Twickenham for a while, and we started building up links with stadiums to see what other people were doing, to put in good practice, to build hostile vehicle mitigation. There's lots of work going on in the background to try and keep people safe. And I'm absolutely convinced that these stadiums have done pretty much everything they can do to give people a safe event.
So, and Chris, you mentioned then the Five Eyes. What exactly is that?
It's a group of nations that come together to share intelligence freely. USA, UK, Australia, New Zealand, etc. And they work very closely together. In fact, if you go into the security agencies in all of those countries, there'll be linked people from other countries, from those countries, working together, sharing intelligence. So if the US, for instance, are picking up a threat somewhere across the world, they will let the UK know, New Zealand know, Australia know, etc. very quickly. And if you remember back to Moscow, the US picked up the intelligence that attack was going to take place in a music event and warned people. And the Russians, of course, didn't want to take any notice and suffered as a consequence. So intelligence is really good. Gathering intelligence from known terrorists and what's going on in the world allows us to have some degree of security, but of course there are always people that get in under the radar, and that's where we've seen attacks take place recently.
Yeah, so with ISIS making these kind of threats, if they were to attack, would they be flying in from anywhere in the Arab world, or would they be using people who are already here, who are signed up and subscribed to their ideals?
Listen, there are many ISIS supporters across Europe, in the UK, Germany, Spain. So there are people there. I think back to an attack that was going to take place in Barcelona many years ago, where they intended to blow up 5 different locations. And luckily the bomb went off when they were trying to prepare it, which stopped the attack. And they ended up knocking people over in Les Ramblas. You might remember that. So, there are many people across our countries. We've let them in, and we've allowed people to become radicalised within our countries. There are a threat. That's the biggest concern to us, really, not people that are coming in from outside. It's actually people within our borders that hold this extreme ideology that wants to kill people.
Well, speaking of biggest threats, Chris, is Harry Kane the biggest threat to Arsenal tonight?
Well, it looks like, yeah, but Arsenal are playing well. They should be all right. But listen, we just want all the British teams to do well, don't we? Even if you're a Tottenham supporter.
No, not true. Not true. Chris Phillips, former head of National Counter-Terrorism Security. Thank you very much.